Hello, welcome. So I'm Kara Goodwin, and I'm really excited to have.
The Zenith from the I've forgotten my own podcast from, and it's right here too. From the Spirit Channel podcast. Lovely to meet you again, Kara. We've had an interview before, but this is a kind of special one, I guess.
Yes, yeah, this is really exciting because I've never done this. So I've had the meditation conversation podcast since 2018, and I've never done a collaborative one. It's always been having a guest on or me as a guest. And so I was on, was it last week? The week before, I think. Was it the week
Yeah,
before?
a good couple of weeks ago now.
Yeah. And I was on the Spirit Channel, and we had such a great conversation, and we had to cut it short. I mean, it was a good length anyway, but um, and so we kept talking about doing it again, and I was like, you know what? Like, I would love to hear about your experiences. It feels like we've had a lot of cross experiences where we can, not verify each other, well, kind of like confirm
Mhm.
each other's experiences. And I think we've heard enough little tidbits from each other to feel that there's synchronicity there. So then we were like, maybe we could just do one podcast where we both contribute, and we kind of basically a conversation that we probably would have had privately that we just put out there, and we put it on both of our channels per se. So what a blessing to be here with you today like this. We're just going to
Yeah,
pave the way. We're going to figure it out as we
yeah.
go.
Give me 1 second. The lighting in here has just got really bad. Yeah, that's a bit better. Yeah. So I think when we sort of were having our first conversations, I had mentioned to you, and I was kind of a bit apprehensive about saying, like, what way should I approach this? How do I tell this person and hope that hope that they don't think that I'm some sort of crazy stalker? But I remember saying to you, like, for some reason, I just seem to be attracted to your vibration. And thankfully, you didn't just turn and say, go away from me. I don't want to hear you again. So it is kind of apprehensive because I guess we're kind of limited by language. And although this format here is a lot easier, and that's why I started doing voice notes, it's so much more easier. But we can't really communicate with feelings, so the other person might not understand where the other person's coming from. So things can be very misinterpreted. So it is a bit apprehensive when you're connecting with someone, when you turn around and tell them, look, I feel drawn to you for some reason. But I think thankfully you took it the right way, and we've had some conversations about that, which obviously has led up to this second podcast, because you're, as you rightly say, we just didn't get the time to have a real in-depth conversation. And I guess this is where we are now. We're having the meditation conversation.
That's right. On the Spirit Channel.
So yeah, I guess this conversation is going to be what we didn't get around to speaking to last time on when I interviewed you, which was about these multi-dimensional, multi uh, reality, whatever you want to call it, experiences that we both have had. And I know that other people that I have communicated with, and probably the same as you, have had those experiences, just maybe slightly different ones. So I was really interested to find out, when you first, approached me and asked me to, would you, would I like to have you a guest on? You said, like, I'm an experiencer of these, which automatically got my attention, because it is, I guess, it's not like you can go out into the everyday world and, say to someone, what did you do last night? Well, I was in the middle of a meditation. I kind of left my body and visited the astral planes and surrounded by these light beings, and kind of my vibration. All right, okay. Well, I just watched TV, so
Yeah.
you kind of have to be careful who you tell that to. So when you do meet someone who says, I'm an experiencer, we should have like an AA meeting of experiences, or whatever you call it. Hi, I'm Zenith and I'm an experiencer.
Yeah.
So we really do need to have conversations like this. And I guess this is what we're trying to do here. between the two of us, and whoever listens to this, whoever watches this conversation, because just before we went live, we were talking about this idea that I'm sure other people have had these experiences. Other people have, had sort of dreamy type experiences where they've just thought, well, it just must be normal, or it must just be thing. And it's only when you begin to open up and talk about this, then you begin to realize, wow, not everybody has these, or what I'm experiencing is not normal for as in like a normal human experience. So I guess that's what we're kind of hoping to talk about. And I, like yourself, I've mentioned a few things, I've published a few things on my blog, and I always get the sense that people think, yeah, right, yeah, that all happened there, and yeah, that happened, whatever. But it does. I have nothing to gain from sharing these experiences other than potential ridicule with people,
Yeah.
but it's to let people know that what they're going through is a very kind of spiritual, if you want to put it like that, or a very sort of higher frequency experience.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple of things that I want to reinforce, because one thing is, when I have shared things like these experiences before, sometimes they do get misinterpreted as dreams, because I forget that it's not that I forget that not everybody has these kinds of things, but just that it's so clear when you're having them that you're not dreaming. I mean, I can hear what's happening around me. I have animals, I can hear them moving. For me, it often happens when I'm falling asleep at night rather than in a meditation, which is different than your experience. I understand. But for me, it's kind of spontaneous and in that way. But, my son's room is next door, and his, he moves around a lot, up and down, going to the bathroom and stuff. Like, I can hear everything, all the real world sounds around me. And I also know the difference between being awake and being asleep, but I try to sound can be an easy way to help people understand, no, I definitely wasn't dreaming. I could hear everything, but there's that awareness too. The difference between falling asleep and being asleep, when you're just there and your eyes are closed and you're in bed, but you're not sleeping. So that was one point. And maybe that was the main thing. But I think it's also just the sharing of it, and how it may not be that everybody's had these kinds of things happen, so there's not necessarily a frame of reference. One of the things that we talked about in my interview on your show was, you call it the green ray. And people call it different things. There's this, you might hear it as the new earth, but this change of the environment that we're in, the change of this human experience that's happening right now. And it doesn't happen in a blast where it's okay, well, we were here and now we're suddenly here. It can feel that way sometimes, that we've just made a leap or something different has changed and we're not really quite sure why. But I believe more and more and more people are going to start having experiences like this. And I have not always had these experiences. This is only, I think I had really the first kind of one since my awakening, 2 or 3 years ago. And then they didn't start really becoming more regular until in the last few months, really, that they've been more regular. So I say that because I have a mentor, and I've had a mentor for a couple of years, and or is it 3 years? About 2.5 years now. And he would tell me things that these types of, he wouldn't really go into a lot of detail about the experiences, but the insight and the knowledge that he would get through these multidimensional experiences. And I would be able to understand him, to a certain point, but I didn't have the experience to be yes, I know what you're talking about. But when I have found myself in these experiences, so often things that he has told me, I then experience them for myself in a certain way. And it's usually not exactly as he explained it, but I'm oh, this is what he's talking about. And then I have my own version of it, or my own perception of that higher truth. And so it is like as we share these things, we open things up for other people so that they can start expanding their own field to understand that these things do happen, that they can be a part of the human experience, and they help to deepen our connection to what's beyond the human experience. But they also give us a frame of reference so that, for one thing, when they start to happen, we have a frame of reference so that we don't think that we're going crazy, and so that we can kind of recognize also, like, okay, are there truths that are being shown here, or are there, and then we have our own version of things that we may have heard in the past. And it's like that they can come to us in that moment too, to sort of like add another dimension or layer to the whole thing, where it's like, oh, we're pulled back to, 2 years ago when we first heard about that possibility. That's another layer in this multidimensional experience where your past is being brought through into that moment that's also timeless and present. And, so there's so much to it. But so I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of those things. But
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there. Goodness, I don't quite know what's going on with this, but we'll
is the sound not good? Is it the same?
There's just a feedback on it. I wonder if no, because I don't have. It's okay. We'll go through it, because I remember something like this happening last time. Yeah. I guess for me, trying to remember quite everything of what you said there, you're right. I would agree with that too. I haven't always had these experiences, as in understanding what they were. It only happened sort of after my awakening. I had buried myself so far and so deep into this kind of physical world, because for me, I always felt like an outsider. I always felt different, but I had nobody to communicate to. I wasn't aware of anything spiritual or anything like this. I do, looking back upon my journey now, realize that all the signs were there. We're collecting books on hypnosis and Nostradamus and all that sort of stuff. Never quite reading them, sort of into my kind of later years. Downloading, tons of ebooks on all like astral travel and out of body experiences and occultism and all that sort of stuff, which kind of led unread, so that it was always there. Even a book that I pulled out of the attic, which is about 20 years old, which I purchased off a Hare Krishna monk, about the art of self-realization, not knowing the significance, and only 20 really years later, discovering that, and even kind of now talking to you about it, because it reminds me of the self-realization fellowship, whatever you want to call that, brotherhood or sect or whatever it is that you were kind of involved in. Where, they talk about that. So the signs were kind of all there. It's just obviously, I wasn't ready yet until my awakening. Through that awakening, developing and experiencing more and more, until eventually, I started having those experiences. And you're right, I think perhaps in the last few months they've begun to get stronger, and become more intense. I would say that I'm kind of lucky, especially in these last few years, to be surrounded by so many kind of spiritual people. And even out of all of those spiritual people, there's maybe about a handful that I can speak to who have had similar experiences, but you can kind of bounce off on them. But I don't think that there's anyone that has really had I say no one. I did connect with a guy from Uganda through a messaging app, and he asked me to read his book, and pretty much the same thing. And he's, had these enormous experiences. But outside of potentially him and what you're describing, people have said to me, although they've kind of experienced similar things, not potentially to the depth that I've kind of had them. So
Well, why don't we go ahead and start with why do you want to take us through an example of
Yeah.
something that comes to mind?
Yeah, well, just before I do, we were just having a bit of a conversation, and I guess this is important for people listening and for people watching.
Mhm.
Just a little bit of history. I was telling you that whenever I was a child, I used to wake up from sleep, um, and the world was distorted to me. The worldview was distorted. I had two different perspectives. And it wasn't quite so much the sight as in the feeling that everything to me seemed very far away and very tiny. And I felt enormous, but at the same time, I looked the same and everything seemed to my physical eye the same, but I couldn't look at anything. It was very unnerving. I didn't know what I was going through as a child. No one could understand it. The doctor was phoned for me numerous times and performed a number of checks, and he just put it down to, he's kind of woken up from sleep too soon. And as I was telling you, the only way that I could return to kind of normalcy, if you want to put it, was by getting like an empty glass and looking through that glass in which everything was distorted through that. I would maybe sit like that for 20 minutes to half an hour, if not longer, until I felt that I feel right again. It wasn't quite so much a physical, oh my God, everything looks tiny. It was more what way can I describe this? A kind of mental, or as I know now, a kind of spiritual distortion, a kind of thing. And it was only a teacher that I was speaking to very recently, said to me, like, probably what you were experiencing, you were still in the astral plane.
Mhm.
So, you could turn around and say that it was an astral experience or an etheric experience, but for some reason, I was not quite in my physical body. But as I said, I had no idea what that was or what that experience was now. It's only looking back on that, many, many years later and having explained to me is that potentially all the ingredients were there. But a bit like on kind of like you, most of my experiences seem to happen through meditation, or I've had a number of experiences where I'm almost ready to wake rather than falling asleep. And you're right, it's kind of that state. Some people call it twilight, others have called it the hypnagogic state, where you're not asleep, but you're not fully conscious. You're in one of those alpha brainwave states, I think, or something like that, in which you're aware that you're not asleep, but you're not fully awake yet. Your eyes are shut. You're too tired to come awake, and it's kind of like when your imagination comes into play. I guess maybe people might understand it like that, and you're sort of having it's almost like having a movie in which you're taking part in sometimes, where things are kind of going on around you, and you understand that you're not dreaming, but maybe people talk to you, or you're away somewhere, or things like that there happen. um, I've had people kind of talk to me. I've had, even in dreams, I've kind of been slapped in the face. Um,
Wow.
I was slapped in the face. I was aware that there was a presence around me. I guess some people call it spirit, others call it the higher vibrationals or multidimensional beings. But there was definitely a presence around me. I could feel it in the dream, and I was dreaming at the time, but in the next instant, they slapped me around the face. And in the dream, I was kind of like, well, what did you do that for? And the voice just said, wake up, wake up. And
Oh,
so what did
wow.
I do? I woke up and went, okay, right now I've woke up. Well, what is it? And I was, did I sleep in? Am I late for,
They're like, the bigger waking up. Wake
yeah,
up bigger.
yeah. And I realized then I hadn't slept in, everything was fine. They were telling me to wake up. And I've had that experience a few times, where beings or people have come to me and, kind of turn around and tell me, you're going to be waking up soon.
Wow.
And like, just kind of creating an environment for myself and having full blown conversations with I but don't know. I guess these people or these beings take on human form so that we can more easily identify them. But just numerous experiences that got there just before I've waken up, or messages that have come to me just in that last second, just before you wake up. Um, and that's generally how it happens for me before I wake up. But most of my really sort of deep astral experiences have happened during meditation.
Mhm.
So I kind of do have a process that I follow that has resulted in better experiences, or seems to bring that state on more than others. But it's not exclusively to that. I've had just very simple meditations, which I'm preparing to maybe go on a Zoom, and I'll try and squeeze in a 15-20 minute meditation. And all of a sudden, bang, I'm away, or I've had experiences. One of the ones that I haven't actually talked about was having this sense, and most of mine are kind of like in a void or a space. I guess that's a way for them to appeal to my senses, I guess, if you like, for me to understand that I'm not quite, on planet Earth at the time. But this kind of experience where I was surrounded by a void, or in space or something like that there, and I'm on this kind of rocky ground. It seems to be like a planet or an asteroid. I'm only recalling from memory here, but in front of me there was like a portal, or it was like a screen, and I could see through it. There was someone with me. There was a being with me, and he was showing me my life. He was showing me different things through the portal. And I can remember that it wasn't like a television. It didn't have like a back on it. I can remember that it was just this thin kind of thing. I could almost look around the back, and there was literally nothing there. But this being was showing me different things in my life through it, and I was looking into it. But afterwards, the experience kind of changed, and for some reason, I was looking above me, and I guess it's not that these places are physically above you. It's to give you a sense of, right, well, this is a higher vibration. And when I looked above me, the person said that's the realm of the angels.
Mm.
And my awareness sort of went into that place, and it was a golden place. It was very different from the place that I was currently having. It was pure golden, and it wasn't that these beings with wings came down. I guess that's only again, that's an archetype, or a way for the human consciousness to understand that these beings are not, ordinary beings. They were almost invisible in this golden light, so they blended into this golden light. They were almost kind of invisible. I can remember sort of seeing their eyes and stuff, and the next thing I knew, I was transported into this realm, and I was surrounded by these. But it wasn't that I said, I'm only recalling from memory. It wasn't that I was surrounded by light. The scene kind of changed, and it took on I was in a garden, and there was a play park there, and it almost felt like I was a child, because I was on a swing, and I was kind of being pushed on this swing. But it wasn't, as I said, it was a, how can I describe this? It's hard to try and to get these experiences
Yeah.
into words, because these experiences go beyond words. You
Mhm.
can't quite conceptualize these experiences in the human language. But hopefully, if there's people watching this, if there's people listening to this, they will be able to understand. But it wasn't that I was in a physical playground. The concept was being given to me that you're somewhere safe, that you're just like a child. And I was content there. I was happy. I felt like a child in this playground. I got the sense that these beings who were at each of my side, who were pushing me on the swing, were timeless, were always caring. They were so wise, and it was just a feeling of pure bliss. It was a
Mhm.
feeling of pure bliss and contentment. And after the experience kind of ended, and I quite returned into my physical body, that feeling still stayed with me of bliss and contentment and happiness. So sometimes I think the memories fade, and sometimes when you have an experience like that, you just put it down to your imagination. But when you begin to have more and more of these experiences, you begin to realize this isn't just my imagination. I'm actually experiencing something. And if
Mhm.
you have those feelings that are associated with experiences like that, you'll know that it's not your imagination. So that's
No.
just one sort of experience that I've had in that kind of short meditative state. I've had other longer, more sort of impactful experiences, but I'd love to get just one of your.
Yeah, well, that brings to mind something that I think it was just last week. That flows really, really parallel to what you described, because um, last week again, it was like as I was about to go to sleep, and then I realized I wasn't. And one of the ways to, like, as you were describing some of your experiences, I was realizing, like, when I close my eyes, a lot of times I see static, like, for lack of a better word, it just is like a lot of tiny little colors and they're just moving all around. Well, when I have these experiences, it's like that static goes and then I can really see, but it's almost like that static is what we can see when we're clear. When we sharpen our focus and we're able to tune into these other dimensions, it's like that static organizes. And so I so often, when I go to these different places or have these different experiences, I'm like, I know this place. Like I this is familiar to me. And I I often think I come here, but I can't remember it. Like I'm asleep when I do it, or I'm not like consciously aware. And so then it becomes this, like, okay, what can I do to remember this? Like, it's trying to toggle between the bigger me who has access to these things and the little human me who has like a regular human consciousness. And it's like this toggling, like, okay, big me, now remember. It's almost, maybe that could even be thought of as like downloading or something. Like that word seems right in the moment, where it's like pulling this information, this intel, this remembrance, like, remember this, Kara, remember, and because it's so familiar. But I'm like, but it's also like seems brand new. So like, I can't remember with my human mind this ever happening before, but like, I know this place, And so, so I often, like, when I've explained these things before, I'm like, I think that it's not uncommon for all of us, or a lot of us, to be going through these places when we fall asleep, but we lose them, and so that's like the difference, is the ability to remember it. But anyway, that static dissolving into the clarity, it was something that kind of surprised me when I first started having this, where I'm like, oh my God, it's been here all the time. Like this, it's here, it's in me, Yeah. But the thing that you talked about when you talked about entering the angelic realm, I felt that similar thing last week, or actually it was St. Patrick's Day, funnily enough. So it's fun to be talking to somebody from Ireland.
Yeah, there's that connection again.
That's right. So so on St. Patty's Day night, I had, where I was kind of traversing and kind of, a lot of times for me, it starts where that static gives way, and then it's like a lot of color, and it's a dome. Like I'm in a dome with all these colors, and it looks like, I always have like a Moroccan feel. I've not been to Morocco, but or like a mosque, kind of like what I am. And again, I don't even know that I've been in a mosque, but that's what I get. I'm like, oh, that's because you see the domes, on the outside, and I'm like, it just always reminds me of like something like that, because it's very dome, and it's like almost looks like tiles. Very much has a tiley feel to it, because it's these like repeating colored pattern kind of things. And many things happened that night on St. Patrick's Day, like in the multidimensional realm traveling thing. But the one that reminds me of a lot was like, I kind of kept going higher and higher. And I say that, but I'm in my body. Like I'm very aware that I'm in my body. Not always, but often it's like these multidimensional things open up, but I'm very aware that I'm in my body. So that's really funny to me, because there's a lot of talk about like as within, so without. Yeah. And everything is the universe is within you, and you can access everything through the universe. And I have found more and more that is true. One of the biggest experiences I've had, I did feel like I was transcending and that I was like somewhere else, and which felt very much more astral travel-y. But many of my experiences, it's like something just opens up within me, and it's like I am in my body, but it's like this whole big thing's going on. You know, it's like all these dimensions are here. And so there was a portal, and it was, but I was traveling through the portal at a high speed with a lot of turns, and a lot of like, and it reminded me of like the way that the brain wrinkles and kind of comes back, you know?
Would you say maybe it's a vortex instead of a portal?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
But it felt like, okay, I'm going through a portal or a vortex. But it felt like I was traveling through my brain very quickly. And I got to this point where I was like, it was white, and it was like a pine cone. And it was like a much smaller dome, like not as expansive. It was much more concentrated. And I was like flickering. And it was like, there were a few things. It was like, I guess, I mean, I associated it with the crown, you know, like trying to get through the crown. And there was this like, I think I was hesitating going through because I wanted to remember. Again, I was like toggling, like big self, little self, but it was like like it was so fast. I was toggling back and forth. And I was like, is this I don't know if it was an activation, like it felt like toggling, but it was really like this activation at this point, or if there was hesitation that I wasn't sure if I should go. I mean, I definitely wanted to, but I don't know if some part of me was holding myself back. I also had the sense that there was someone on the other side going, don't let her in, she's human. It was like a male energy, kind of felt like holding it closed. Ultimately, like toggle, like flashing, and then I did pierce through, and then I found myself in this golden realm. And like you said, I could see like everything was very bright, very gold. And so you mentioned you didn't see the angel form, and what I saw was, it was like if you took a blanket or a bed sheet, and you pinched it in the middle and you pulled it up, and you know how it would like drape down like a ghost. It was like that, but I was looking up. So I was kind of looking up at these billowy, like moving, like movements, just very like, I don't know how else to describe it, but sort of like these floating, but again, like I'm kind of like seeing them from below, and a lot of yellow. So that was like, I was seeing gold, like a lot of gold, and it's not, I'm sure you had the same, where it's not like gold, like this flat kind of gold that we see here, but it's like this living gold, but like it's got so much to it, you know, it's like this glimmering, dancing, alive gold, you know, and then that like billowy shape that I saw was yellow. And that was all that I could remember. I think I fell asleep at that point because I couldn't hold anything else after that. And there were other things to do with like the brain, and do with more like stuff around me, in that same night. I remember at one point I did have my eyes open. I was staring at the ceiling and could see different shapes and passageways, and I don't know, that was another, like, it was just very clear that everything is all around us. And it's a matter of what we focus on and like what we pull in. But it was like, oh, I can make my eyes, like I could make my eyes adjust to like any dimension, which kind of freaked me out because it didn't freak me out, but I was like, I'm aware of this and I don't want to pull in something that's going to scare me. So I wasn't like, oh, let me flip it to here and flip it to here. Cause I knew like everything's in here. So like I can pull like demons. If I wanted to focus on that, I could pull them in, you know? And so it was kind of like, what do I want to see? Cause I don't want to see everything, you know? And so, but it was interesting. I could see like these like octagonal or hexagonal like passageways, and different shapes and different, and I definitely had the sense of different beings. It was like I wouldn't see them because I didn't want to be startled. But I was going back and forth, like in the moment, like I do want to see, I'll be strong. It's like, but I don't know. I don't know who's there. I don't know how I'll handle it. So it's kind of like not diving right in. And I think I held myself back enough that I didn't quite see, but I could definitely feel there were multiple beings with me. But
yeah, I mean, it's hard to, this must be my microphone. It's hard to get those experiences into words because they go beyond words, don't they? They're feelings. They are, they're just experiences. That they're more of a feeling that it's trying to describe a feeling. You could spend 1,000 words, and you'd only sort of dance around the issue. But it is fascinating. It actually reminds me of a very sort of close friend. I think maybe a couple of friends. We would have shared our experiences, and she has always talked about being inside buildings when she's went into these places, like maybe to learn something or meeting people, and definitely dome buildings. My experiences have always taken place outside of buildings, so it is interesting. But there's just quite a lot there that you said that I kind of want to touch on. And I guess one of the first things before I, just go, look, oh, here's mine, is that the idea where you mentioned there about, like, I would call it a green ray, as you said, it's maybe the new earth, people call it the shift. It just really depends what sort of concepts you're familiar with. I think we're all can agree that there is a massive change taking place. And I think these experiences are becoming more common as the veil thins between this world and the higher vibrations. I guess maybe that's a better way of saying it. And I've kind of always wondered, where exactly am I? Is this what we would call the spirit world? Is it just another higher vibration? Where exactly am I when I'm in these? And we've kind of talked about it a lot. And for me, most of the experiences have taken place and most of the beings that I would see are just composed of pure light. Sometimes they're in humanoid form, but most of the time it's just pure light. Different from that angelic realm. Sometimes I'm aware of like a golden city or golden cities, but generally everything is just composed of light. So I've kind of always wondered, am I in, the afterlife? Am I astral traveling into what we would call the astral plane, or the afterlife? Is this a higher vibration than that? Because I'm sure, as you're aware, there are so many different vibrations, and the number 7 keeps cropping up a lot in throughout occult teachings and throughout what I would say in a lot of channeling experiences. Sometimes people talk about like a 5D, we're transitioning to a 5D. A lot of the Confederation teachings would talk about densities. And I think that's, people kind of get confused and get caught up in this. No, it's 5D. No, it's 4th density. I think really what we're talking about is the same thing. Really, a density and a dimension are just different vibrations, and it's a different vibration of light. And you were talking about the light being sort of interactive. It's alive. And I think once we are at these at a soul level, I guess, we haven't left our body. It's just a different body. We're composed of pure light, and in that state, we can manipulate light. We can wield light very much like we would breathe, I guess, here, or we in our physical experience where we grip tools. We talk about manifestation and the power of thought and stuff. And I think in these higher dimensions or higher densities, they can like manifest something very quickly into existence. I guess, if you like, they can wield light in a way in which they can clothe themselves in a physical form, change their appearance. This is why we would see so much phenomenon on this planet. We see beings and craft and stuff like that, which are at a higher vibration that can seem invisible to us. They can wink in and out of existence. They're using light in a way in which we're not quite accustomed to, or we don't know how to. But at their vibration, at their thing, I think people talk about. I know this is kind of off at a tangent, but it's still the sort of same thing where we're talking about beings, we're talking about extraterrestrials or higher dimensionals. It's all pretty much the same thing. We're not talking about a nuts and bolts craft like a car. We're talking about sometimes these crafts come in as orbs. They're light. Sometimes these things are tiny. Sometimes they're enormous. Sometimes they'll appear as if they are a metal or a physical craft, but I don't think they are. They're at a higher vibration in which they do not require physical materials to transport themselves through dimensions, through vast dimensions, or what's the word? Distances of space and time. So I think to us, certainly those beings in the higher dimensions again are able to wield light in a way that is beyond our capabilities, and to us it would seem that they are performing miracles. But again, it's just this connection with light, and this wielding of light in which they can do things that would seem to us miraculous. A bit like, I guess, some of the things that we know that Yogananda recounted in his autobiography of those really amazing gurus and masters like Sri Yukteswar Babaji. There's an awful lot of talk of Master Jesus, Saint Germain, all them ascended masters who are, operate at higher dimensions and higher frequencies, where they're able to wield this light and perform things that we consider miracles. So I think potentially that's what we're experiencing. But I think that the vibrations are becoming stronger between this world and the next, and this is why more of us are experiencing things like this, and they're becoming more frequent. They're becoming more intense. As we begin to make this shift and these shifts happen. And I think you're right, it doesn't happen overnight. It's waves, and sometimes these waves we're not quite aware of them, but there's like a sense of downloads. There's a sense of things happening. I remember one time in which I was in that kind of state, not quite dreaming, but in that sort of state between awake and asleep, and I can't quite remember it all now. Normally I write these down as soon as I awaken or experience them. But I remember thinking, I'm too tired. I don't want to get up and face the day. I just don't. Can you not? And whoever I was talking to, I was like, could you just not take my place? Okay, we'll go ahead and take your place. And I was like, right, okay, I'm just going to take a back seat here to you can drive my physical body about. And I think it was actually my higher self. But I woke up with this really strange sense, and I could barely communicate with anyone. And I think that experience happened throughout the day. And obviously I came back round through that experience, but there was this sense of a shift taking place within me, within my body, within my soul, I guess. There's a sense of downloads happening. I think that's happening quite a lot too, so that we're getting upgrades, we're getting like DNA upgrades in which our frequencies are becoming higher. We're able to attune into those higher frequencies. So I think there's a lot of that happening, but where these experiences are happening, they're definitely happening at a higher frequency, at a higher vibration of light than we're accustomed to. Whether you want to call that a density or a dimension, it doesn't really particularly matter. One thing I kind of did wonder, well, is this a density, or is it a higher dimension, or is it some of these inner planes which I've talked about? But that a conversation is just kind of maybe for another time, because I don't quite understand the concept of inner planes and, you know, outer dimensions and stuff like that. So I think it's, for me anyway, to break that down, is that what we're experiencing then is a different frequency, a different vibration. And it's becoming easier the more that these waves of energy, the more that these transformations are taking place.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And that's what has fascinated me too through these experiences, is understanding that, again, it is all happening around us, and like a neutrality with the dimensions, because we tend to, like, in the human form, it can be really easy to be like, well, 5 must be better than 4, and 4 is definitely better than 3, and 7 must be better than 5. And, you know, like the high, oh, wow, they're 12th dimension, you know, or whatever. And it was, I mean, that was one of the experiences that I had, was like, oh, okay, so if I see this, like, I can pull this in to see, like, what's happening, you know, in this layer. And it was just like, that's just what's happening there. It's not better. And of course, like, you know, when we talk about density, you know, it is like, there are people who are serving, you know, service to self versus service to others, and all of this stuff, where, you know, when the truth is that we are in this unified, like, there's one thing happening, and the more that we connect with that one thing, that is that higher, that just is a higher vibration, because it is, you know, that is like more aligned with pure light. The more we are in that connection, the more we are that pure light. But I was experiencing, like, this neutrality of just like, okay, they're just like layers, you know, they're just bands, they're layers. And it's not like, ooh, I have to get to the 8th because that's like where it's happening, you know, like that's where like the real good stuff is, you know. It was just like, well, that's just what is held at that, in that layer, you know, and it's not like it's better than here. So that's another thing that can be hard for me, you know, because I kind of feel like, well, it must be better. Like 5th must be better. Like, I'm totally in that. Like, oh, I would love to experience the 5th dimension. Like, let's do that. So, you know, there's something to be said for that neutrality, because I think that is kind of associated with more of beyond the human experience, is just kind of this acceptance and neutrality, and like, it's all good, you know, it all serves a purpose, and we can pull in what we want. If we want the lower stuff, we can call it in, and we do, but a lot of times we don't know that we're doing it. But it's like, that's what we're focusing on. Everything is about where we're focusing on. That law applies here for sure. But you know, you talk about manifestation, like when we're experiencing these higher densities, it's more immediate. When we're here, it's slow, but it's still the same laws. So it's like, if we're going to keep, and I, you know, work on this too, because I find that I'll get stuck where I'm like, God, I'm really dreading something, you know, and it's like, that's still not happening for another, you know, however long, few weeks, months, whatever, but I'm really dreading it, you know? And it's like, wait a minute. Okay. So what am I focusing on? Like, if I'm dreading it, what vibration am I pulling to me? And it's going to be one that matches that. And it's hard, like, to remember that in the moment, like when we're really being human, you know. Yeah. It's like, but it's been very evident to me through some of these experiences. That's been one of the points that has been given, is like, wherever you want to focus, it's what you're pulling through. I've seen it as beacons of light as well, where, you know, I have been seeing myself from the perspective of what I like to call creator being. It's just like this. It was beyond planetary. It was beyond the solar system. It was beyond the galaxy. You know, this was like far, far, far back. And I was, as little me, like I was communicating to that big creator being through light. And it was literally the things that I do moment to moment. I am showing how bright and how strong I want to communicate to that creator being. And every choice that I make will impact that light. And so if I pull myself together with other beings who are also trying to send a strong signal of light to their creator beings, we amplify our light because we like overlap. So this is how it was shown. Like you say, it's like hard to put words to it because it literally was like so clear and instantaneous. Oh, I can see what little Kara's doing because she shows me her light, and she shows me what she wants based on the light that she gives me. If she wants a high experience and she wants like to experience the highest version, the most divinity, then she shines it really bright. Well, how do I shine it bright? It's the words that I speak. It's the thoughts that I think. It's the actions that I take. It's the loving kindness that I show. It's the music that I choose to listen to, the media I choose to engage with, the books that I'm reading. All of those things are going to affect my light in a very real, practical way. It's like, this is what I want. I'm going to just keep consuming, you know, through my relationships and through like the things that I focus on. That's going to bring light to me, but it's also going to amplify what I want. Like, this is what I want. And the more of us who are doing that, and we're bringing this light, and we're saying, you know, and it's not, again, like we're just doing it naturally. Likewise, I could choose to make my experience not so light by focusing on violence, by focusing on guilt, by focusing on hatred, focusing on shame, and all of the things that dim my light, and watching violence, and watching, you know, listening to music that's going to pull me down and bring me. And it's, again, from that creator being perspective, there's no judgment. It's not like, oh, that's what you want. It's like, it's just going to serve. It's just serving. Okay, you're showing me you don't want that much light. You're showing me you want this level of experience. Okay, here you go. And again, it's not necessarily instantaneous. It's not necessarily like, oh, okay, I go and say terrible things about my neighbor, and then instantaneously I feel that karma. It might work that way, but it's not necessarily. Like, we're kind of moving through mud down here where things have a lot slower response time. But it is happening. It's very, very real how that happens. And so that can be a very practical way to understand, like, why is there this focus on high vibe? Like, how does that actually work beyond, like, put out, you get back what you put out, you know, all that stuff. It's like, it's a communication, you know?
Yeah. There's some very good point. I don't know what's going on with this. There's some very good points
on my side.
No, I think it must be my side. There's some very good points that you made there, and I think that experiences like these ultimately do change you. You begin to want more of those experiences, and understanding that they can sort of only come when you begin to change yourself. Gives you the impetus then to change. And it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't transform you immediately as a person. You still have that higher awareness. And when you're in those states and you think back to your small life, and why was I even worrying about that? Why does that even matter to me? Those things, they're earthly things. They do not concern me here. But ultimately, we have to come back into these bodies and live our human experiences. And sometimes, as much as they are amazing, we do get caught up in those lower three-dimensional experiences, because ultimately, we have chosen to come here, and that's what we need to come to terms with: is that you chose to inhabit a human body. You chose to come from these higher vibrations into a human body to serve. And I think a lot of potentially people get caught up in that, and don't realize and just want to escape
Yes. They
this.
want, like, that's that transcending, that transcendental, which there's nothing wrong with transcending. But if we have this core belief that we have to overcome our human experience because the real stuff's happening beyond, that defeats the purpose of why
Yeah.
we're here. As you say, we're here to serve. We're here to hold this light here at this time for the planet, for humanity, for our collective consciousness, for a really real reason. And it's not to keep trying to chase something that's outside of us. And so that is a really important, that's medicine for a lot of people, of like, flip. If you feel like you have to get past this human life to get to the real stuff, you've got an opportunity to really flip how you're seeing why you're here and what you're here for. And because there's so much power, and it's like, just keep kind of going so that you can start to really get the most out of your time here. It's like, if you're still here, you're here because you've got to potentially, you could step into a really important role of even just joining that light with other people so that you can strengthen that communication, so that the creators know, okay, look at them. Look at them. Look at that light. They're calling it. Let's give it to them,
You're right. And that's exactly what it's about. It's not about trying to escape this human life. It's a recognition that you are ultimately a pure being of light, a stream of consciousness, a spark of the infinite itself. But you've come here to serve humanity. You've come here to be an anchor of light, to spread that light for not just for yourself. And I think a lot of people get caught up in their own, well, I want this experience. I'm going to, develop as best I can. But I think there, in that regards, you're kind of doing a kind of spiritual bypass by saying it's all about me. Yes, you ultimately have to transform yourself so that you become the best version of yourself, but that is to inspire other people, and that's ultimately what you're here to do. You're meant to take those experiences, you're meant to take what you have developed within yourself as a person to inspire other people to want to change, to make them aware in as much as you can, of this higher reality. Obviously, we can't just go out and start preaching in the street about this, but if people come to us and are attracted to us through our vibration and want to know what it is about us that's different, or what have you changed about yourself, it gives us the avenue to begin potentially, opening up and speaking to people about these experiences on a deeper level. And when you're telling people about them, and that's kind of how it happened for me, whenever I came into contact with someone who was a spiritual medium, I had no idea about this stuff at the time, but listening to that person's experiences triggered an awakening within myself, and I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that my eyesight become distorted, and I began to feel different, and I didn't know what was going on. And then it was explained to me, and when I understood exactly what was happening, then it was just this whole awakening, this whole inrush of love, of awareness that I'd never felt before. And I guess that's how we can transform people. Well, I would hope that would kind of thing. But even just making people aware of this here, and letting them know that there is a bigger life, a larger life than just this human experience. That ultimately we're all going to return to, but potentially they can have experiences if they're not already having them, like the likes of me, the likes of you, likes of many other people. But that is our purpose here on Earth. It's not to escape this human experience. It's to understand that you've chosen to come and live as a human being in order to inspire those people who are potentially on the cusp of
Yeah.
this. It's not that everyone is going to to um to ascend into this higher vibration or graduate. As far as I'm aware, there are cosmic laws, there are stipulations as to how and why. It depends on the evolution of your own soul. How
Mhm.
evolved are you enough? Are you ready for that? Is your soul, your cosmic awareness ready for that higher vibration of light? Because if not, unfortunately, this is the purpose of reincarnation. You will have to reincarnate again and again until you have learned enough in these lifetimes to naturally ascend to that level. So I guess what we're hoping to do is to make other people aware, of this here, who are ready to make that transition through experiences
Absolutely.
like this here.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about for now.
Yeah, that feels like a great stopping point and great
Oh no, sorry, I
abs-
didn't actually mean for the entire interview, but I just meant for me to talk. But we can talk on
yeah.
if you want.
Well, no, I mean, I think that that is a beautiful summary, and I'm kind of happy to go ahead and pause here, and then maybe we can
Yeah, that's
do
a
this
great
again in a
idea.
few months. Or
Yeah, that's
I
actually a
think I
great
know
idea.
that because I think that we could talk for a long, long time on it, and which would be beautiful. But it's nice to keep it consumable also,
Yeah,
and not too
absolutely.
daunting.
Yeah, that's actually a brilliant idea. I think that's a good idea, is that we'll maybe make a part three of this, or a second
Yeah,
part, because you're right. We could talk about our experiences. We could talk about, this sort of stuff for hours and hours and end. But I guess this is a good naturally stopping point. It's about making people aware of what these experiences are, that you're not like everyone else. They are a kind of spiritual experience. And ultimately, it's not about escaping the human experience. It's about understanding and trying to get other people involved in this and becoming anchors of light.
right. Beautifully said. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Zenith. This has been so amazing again. Such a joy to connect with you and collaborate with you. Thank you for all of the amazing work that you're doing to inspire and spread that communication, bring the messages through. It's really valuable. I really appreciate it, and I've loved our time together today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for agreeing to take part in this. It's a two-way street, and it could be nothing without your collaboration, your time and your effort, and your agreeing to come on and even connect with me, after our initial interview, and agree to do this here. But I think you're right. We could maybe potentially do another one of these. So
Yeah,
already I'm looking forward to our next collaboration.
me
So
too.
keep on putting the message out there, keep on doing the work that you're doing to inspire people, and I'll do my little part on my end.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well, Kara, until then, I will see you potentially in the astral plane.
Beautiful.
See you for now. Bye.